Okay, so 2.1e lesson begins on page 27 in your module. So everybody should be on page 27. You should have your pencils ready. And we're going to take a look at subtraction and integers review. So for numbers 1 through 6, they ask us to circle the operation we're going to perform and draw a chip model for each. And of course, we want to state the sum or difference once we have our model to look at. So for number 1, I'm going to circle the operation we are subtracting. And if I'm drawing a chip model, I'm going to start off with a positive 5. So 5 unshaded chips. And remember, if I'm subtracting 3, that means I want to remove 3 positives. So I have plenty of positives, and I can remove 3 of them. And from my model, I can see that 2 positives are remaining, so my difference is positive 2. For number 2, I'm adding 5 and negative 3. So just like number 1, I start with a positive 5, so 5 unshaded chips. But for addition, I'm going to add on to my model, and in this case, I'm going to add negative 3, just like the expression tells me. When I add negative 3, I can see that 3 zero pairs are formed, and all that would be remaining in my model is a positive 2. So the sum is 2. For number 3, we're back to subtraction, and I'm starting with 2 positives to represent the first integer 2. And I want to subtract 6. So the problem is I only have 2 positives. If I want to subtract 6 positives, I'm going to have to add 0 pairs. If I already have 2 positives, I really only need 4 positives. So I'm going to add 4 0 pairs. And remember what this means. By adding 4 0 pairs, I've essentially added nothing. So my model still represents positive 2. But because I've added those 4 0 pairs, I now have 6 positives that I can remove and finish my model. So now I'm going to take away 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 positives from my model, and what's left are the 4 negatives. And so the difference is negative 4. For number 4, I'm adding, so I'm going to start with 2 positive chips, and I'm going to add on 6 negatives. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 negatives. I can see that I have 2 0 pairs, and what's left are 4 negative chips, so the sum is negative 4. Moving on to number 5, so I'm back to subtraction, and my first integer is a negative 6, so I'm adding 6 negative chips to start. I want to remove 2 positives, and as you can see, I don't have any positives, so I can't remove 2 positives if I don't have them. So you know what that means. I have to add 0 pairs, and specifically 2 0 pairs. I want to have 2 positives that I can remove, but I have to add 2 negatives to cancel those out, so that my model still represents negative 6, the first integer in the problem. But by adding my 0 pairs, I can now remove those 2 positives, and if I count up all of the negative chips that I'm looking at, I have 8 of them, so the difference is negative 8. And last one, number 6, we're adding, so we're starting with a negative 6, so that's 6 shaded chips, and I'm going to add 2 negatives to my model, so plus negative 2. I don't have any 0 pairs here because all of my chips are negative, and if I add them all together, I have 8 of them, so the sum is negative 8. And now they have a couple of questions for us, making some comparisons. So for number 7, it says, how do number 1 and number 2 above compare? What is similar and what is different? So if you look back up to number 1 and number 2, you may have noticed that they have the same answer. So they have the same answer. For number 1, the difference was 2. For number 2, the sum was also 2. What's different about them is that they have different operations. So for number 1, I'm subtracting. Number 2, I'm adding. And the models look different. So for subtraction, I've removed chips, and for addition, I've added chips on. So I'm going to list those two things for my differences. They have different operations. So that's referring to the subtraction and the addition. And the models are different. So for subtraction, we are taking chips away, and for addition, we are adding chips on. They ask us a similar question about number 5 and number 6, how they compare, what is similar and what is different. So we can see the answers for number 5 and number 6 on the screen. We can see that they are the same. So I have a difference of -8 for number 5. I have a sum of -8 for number 6. So they have the same answer. One is a difference, one is a sum, but the value is the same, -8. And again, there are different operations. For number 5, I was subtracting. For number 6, I was adding. And the models look different. For number 5, I have removed chips. For number 6, I have simply added chips on. So they have different operations. And the models are different.